Welcome everyone to our first webinar on the next wave of mobility disruptions. My name is Jochen Vril and I'll be your host for this webinar. I'm very proud to have 5 great speakers. All speakers are entrepreneurs and each of them has a very unique background. So we have Amit Gupta from Julu, Bhaskar Dale from eDrive, Alex Danilov from Transit Protocol, Hayashi Sahai from Adaptive City, and last but not least, we have Alex Breach from Calum Labs. Each speaker will do a presentation of about 5 to 7 minutes, I hope. Maybe it will be longer, we'll see. In the presentation, each speaker will share their experience, knowledge, and latest insights. And after the presentations, we will have the possibility to do a 10-minute Q&A session. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section. For now, I would like the first speaker to start.
Okay, so this topic is actually very complicated. So what at least I am trying to do is not trying to talk about flying cars or whatnot. I think we will see in the world of mobility. I am talking about a horizon which is more 3 to 4 years from now. And for the benefit of this group, I would like to bring the insight or the context from India market. And I can imagine that we have participants joining from a lot of part of the world, and I hope you will be gaining some from some of our perspective. So if I talk about India particularly, we are seeing a huge push from the policy perspective, where government of India wants to see most of our electric mobility being electrified. And there's a global theme which we have been hearing and we have been seeing, that mobility should be shared, it will be smart, connected, and then off late, the electric mobility also started becoming important. And what we believe is that in India, particularly, that mobility will also have one more flavor, which is a small. And from a use case perspective, if we talk about it, there will be a use case for passenger, where people are using very small form factors, electric scooters or moped and sometimes kick scooter. Although in India, we realize that a sitting type of moped form factor is probably more favorable than a standing type of kick scooter, which we see in the US or in European countries. And the second use case, which we believe that will be big in our country, it is the entire last mile delivery. So as you know that in India, just like China and US, there's a lot of local commerce happening in the form of people asking for or requesting for food delivery, even e-commerce delivery, which was not pretty big in the country 4 or 5 years ago, but now everyone is ordering through Amazon, Flipkarts, etc. And medicines are coming into the same regime. So, and what we also believe that what happened in China, where most of these last mile delivery became electric, and because of economic reason, we believe same thing will happen in India as well. So as far as Yulu is concerned, we are presently focused only on the first bucket, which is the moving people for short distances. We are the largest one in the country. We have 10,000 vehicles on the road, and we actually have built a business which is also unit economics positive. Now, talking about COVID, so while this transition, whatever as a country we have been talking about, uh, should happen by 2030, but what we believe that COVID-19 actually has accelerated a lot of these transition in the favor of these smart, connected, and small vehicles, which are also powered by electric energy. Uh, very clearly, when we see the word, everyone was worried about their own safety, not only in India, but across the globe. We saw that people moved away. So they didn't want to go to metro, buses, for that matter, even Uber was getting impacted because of people were worried about Corona. But the form factors like a solo riding form factor actually became dominant. And this happened across the globe, where we saw numbers from Lime Bike, Hello Bike, and varieties. We saw that how people adopted, solo mobility in a very big manner. So Corona pushed that pretty quickly for this particular form factor. And even from a revenue and the business perspective, we if we talk about our own, so this is data from one of the cities where we saw that we had some numbers, and the moment there were lockdowns announced, we saw these numbers actually dropping pretty significantly. And same phenomena, we have heard that happened with other companies which are our peer group. But now, if I talk about that over India, further accelerate this development, I can think of these four major bullet points. First, when we started as a business, this industry, there were a lot of experiments. Lime and Bird, as you know, that they took vehicles from Ninebot, which were created for personal use cases, and these vehicles were breaking down in a matter of 5 to 6 weeks. And we also saw that how companies like Mobike, they created a bicycle from first principle. Even with Euro, we ended up doing something which is called multimodal vehicles for shared mobility. And what we believe is that there's a further evolution here. So currently, we are testing where we got these 10,000 vehicles on the road, learned quite a lot, and one dot engine pretty good. Product which is created for India, created for shared mobility, and they are taking care of all of the learnings which we have got till date from last 2 years. And I think that if you have been reading that companies even like Bird, and if you look at China market, Hello Bike and Meituan, they all are pushing the envelope in terms of designing the vehicle for which is perfect for shared mobility. And this is not just one aspect where it is sharing friendly, but if you look at, there's a unit economics also critical and important. So this vehicle has not only to be safe, it should be comfortable, it should be fun to ride, it should be durable. And and I believe that we are actually getting there slowly and slowly. And over next 3 to 4 years, we will see more innovation happening on that front. The second important aspect of this whole business becoming big, and I will simply talk about sustainable mobility, where if you look at any city of future, we are talking about that the city people should use public transportation in a very, very massive manner. And rather than everyone think and build our cities around car, the cities are being now built. The thesis is city should be built around people. And we need to move people rather than moving car. And this is a new thinking which is being talked about as a philosophy. We are also believing at Euro that the whole city transportation should be majorly by buses, by metro, etc. And then for the purpose of first mile and the last mile, we can have good micro mobility solution, good quality footpath, so that people can walk, they can ride, or they can ride some of these electric vehicles. And the good part is, at least in the context of India, there's a lot of work happening on this front, where big cities like Delhi, Bombay, Bangalore, they all basically are taking some assertive stance to make those infrastructure happen. The third thing, I am not seeing a lot of work on that, but I think that will change the movement significantly. It's a standardization in general. So today, if we go out as a mobility as a service company, there's no standardization in terms of the battery. So if I want to, let's say, work with two OEMs, their battery will not be common, and that's a big problem. And each one of us is basically solving for uh, our own standard, and we are building our own components. And this is not only the hardware, but also the software stack being recreated. There's a lot of confusion out there, and we believe that is something which can be done over there. And last but not the least, the policies which is becoming better, I would say. There's a further role in terms of economic incentives which can be given to make things better. Now, if I talk about what's happening in the country, and this is actually pretty interesting to see that there are more than now 100 cities where different countries are taking assertive, stance that they want to create these dedicated tracks. There are policies in place. A country like UK, which actually did not want to promote electric scooter for very long time, now they have opened up permit system. uh, Countries like France, I've been told that there's a economic incentive for people to buy electric bikes. So we are also seeing that there's a huge surge in pedal assisted bikes in the market, where for real people are saying that this is making sense. And thanks to good quality bikes in the market, and also government giving active subsidies and incentives to buy them, is actually changing the narrative in the favor of the sustainable mobility. uh, these are the cities which you can see quickly that they're all talking about sustainable mobility as a big goal for them. And rather than people buying their own car, their own vehicle, and clogging the city, because no one wants to use metro and buses with the same order of magnitude, these cities have understood that we will be going 10 step back if we let that personal vehicle adoption happen the way surveys are telling. So they all have taken a timely stand that let us fight this battle together and rather promote sustainable mobility instead of people buying their own vehicles. And this is the point I was making, that how mobility as a service players, so companies like Yulu, where because we control the demand, we also have a huge control on the ecosystem by the nature that we are now going to talking to battery manufacturer, we're talking to vehicle manufacturer, we are also working with IoT guys. And this is a very complex crisscross of we are forcing people to work together. There's no common standard. And imagine there are 10 companies in a region. Imagine the fragmentation we are talking about. And this is not something which is favorable for our industry. And when we're talking about lot of development happening in such a small period of time. So what we believe is that there's a interesting value proposition which, as a country or as an industry, we can do. We can bring these organizations together, look at open sourcing some of the technologies and some of the standards, so that companies who are in the same domain and space, irrespective of the country, we can adopt to some common hardware and specifications. And this will fast track the development in general. And I believe that while there are a lot of things happening, but this whole island approach or wall garden approach of innovation is actually not good for the industry in general. And Yulu is actually trying to do something around that, and we have been in touch with policymakers if we can open source some of our technology and our standard, so that the larger country actually gets benefit out of that. Uh, and why we believe that this standardization, particularly in battery, is very important, because if you look at the abstraction of mobility, so you can look at this 2 by 2 grid, where on one axis there are people who are going with the vehicles which have got swappable battery, and then there are vehicles which are fixed battery. And then after that, how do you charge them? You charge them either by home charging, or you charge them at a public or a charging station. And as you can see that the first quadrant, which is written with the tag A, this is where a lot of use cases are getting lined up. So business model like Yulu, where we actually have a swappable battery and then we have our own charging network, the use cases of two-wheeler passenger mobility is being solved for. When we talk about last mile delivery for goods, same infrastructure works pretty well. Three-wheelers, e-rickshaw, which are very popular in India, they all basically can be put up in this. And last but not the least, the business model like Gogoro, where one can buy a scooter without buying a battery, but take battery as a service, is also is a part of the same quadrant. And what actually happens that this is so sizable, then you actually can have battery as a service as a very massive business opportunity. And imagine if we do not have a standardization on the battery, this business model again will never happen. I think India is far away in the C and the D part, where people buying their own four wheeler, people buying their own even high standard two wheeler for that matter, which has a fixed battery. Those are very low. That adoption is actually not very quick, and the reason is they're worried about where they'll be charged, their scooter, their four wheeler. And what we believe is that if in the context of India, if we have to focus to fast track the mobility change to electric, then most likely A and B is the area to attack. And for that to happen, there's a need for us to have an open architecture of batteries and some standardization in terms of even the vehicle and the components. And if this can happen, then we will actually see a very fast change in the user pattern and adoption of this business model. So this is my quick 10 minutes on what I see happening in India, and how do you fast track that in the context of mobility. Thank you.
Great, Amit, thank you very much. I think it matches perfectly with the next speaker who is coming up. It's a lucky coincidence because we didn't prepare this, but Pascal is going to explain exactly about this. So I would like to ask Pascal to take the floor and please get started.
Sure. Are you able to see my screen? Okay, I will continue. So, well, thank you so much for the introduction and for hosting this webinar. Joachim, really appreciate it. Very excited to be working in this space of mobility. I am personally sort of new to this sector, having sort of worked more on the renewable energy side of things, and just having spent the last, I would say, 2 years trying to wrap my head around all the transition that's happening in the transport sector, specifically the electrification of it. So without taking much time, let me just quickly say a few words about eDrive. Our goal as a startup we were founded about 2 years ago is to really focus on making it easy for businesses to electrify transportation, and really decarbonizing the transport sector will follow as a result. And then it's almost like the first step that is needed for the shift to happen. Electrification followed by the electricity sector itself becoming green. Our product specifically is a SaaS platform for businesses who want to own and operate EV charging, either as an amenity, as a facility to their employees, visitors, and staff, but also as a business opportunity to make money from it. This is the only slide where I'll talk about what we do. Essentially, our key features are around plug and go. So really bringing the seamless experience of an electric vehicle driver, wherein you just go, you plug in your car, and then it's up and running. So you don't need to fidget with apps. So all the clunkiness, the friction around using EVs and EV charging, our aspiration is to take that away. We do that by making it very easy for drivers to authenticate themselves, and we're built on a scalable API platform. So that's about eDrive. Now, I think just building on what Amit said, and if I can take a sort of a global perspective, we should all keep in mind that, of course, this year has been a big dip given Corona, the crisis ongoing. But it's amazing to see that of all the sectors, electric mobility and the transition has just, gotten tailwinds, and that's applicable not just for the smaller sort of, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, but this is something that's kind of being seen across the globe. And I think in no small part, it's because of the regulatory push, the incentives here in Europe, where we're based. You're seeing that the EU incentives have actually resulted in a significant push for EVs. In fact, earlier this week, there was a report published by McKinsey wherein they say that the 2022 forecast for electric vehicle sales for the next couple of years, did not change at all pre-COVID and post-COVID. And obviously that's simply because the EU has linked their incentive packages to EV sales. And I think a lot of countries are doing that. I think we're seeing that in India. We're seeing that in other parts of Southeast Asia. And I think in the US, hopefully we'll see that as well. Now, with the result of all of this, you're going to see the EV sales triple in the next 3 years to almost 5-6 million, growing almost 45% year on year. By 2030, you're going to start seeing a real shift, because at the point where you start seeing 15, 20, 30% sales of all vehicles being electric, that's when it's no longer this new technology. There is no longer a discomfort around switching to it. And drivers, public, they really come to see it as something that's quite a part of the normal. And this is going to happen across Europe, across Asia, across, all the major countries. And specifically, what does that mean for us as a business and the sector that we operate in, which is electric vehicle charging? Is that this is going to push a huge demand for charging infrastructure. And specifically, if we look at, homes, workplaces, different locations where charging happens, there's going to be a need for almost 50 million connectors. This is just for home and workplace charging to cater to the needs of the new automobiles that'll be on the road. Now, if you see the shift from sort of the overall market shift from internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, I think the fundamental change in behavior results from how you interact with it. So rather than filling your tank once in a week or once in 10 days, you're going to top up. And so more and more drivers will come to expect that their EV charging experience happens in a way that's linked to their normal routine anyway. So depending on whether they're at home, workplace, or visiting a shopping mall, or staying at a hotel, or living in an apartment complex, or traveling down a highway, that would determine what kind of charging they expect, what is the amount of time they spend charging, and what is a normal expectation that, do you want your vehicle to be topped up in 15 minutes, 2 hours, or 8 hours? Now, what we are seeing on the back of that in terms of business models is business models reflect this behavior of the driver. And what we're going to see is on the far right of it's a continuous spectrum, more or less, is you'll see more and more business models emerge, which are kind of like managed services for gas stations, if you will. And on the far left is almost like an amenity where, hotels, for example, or workplaces will offer EV charging as an amenity, as a perk, as something to attract and retain sort of most of their high-performing employees who care about sustainability. So I think what we're going to see is the way the user expects the charging experience will determine some of the business models, and I have some more ideas I want to share in that direction. As a result of the electrification, we are anticipating again in the next 3, 4, 5 years. I want to leave you guys with a couple of I would say areas where we as a company see a lot of innovation happening around business models. And I want to talk about 4 of them. From the perspective of an infrastructure provider, if you are running an EV charging business, how do you do that? What are the technology options available to you? How do you meet the standardization requirements? And I think, Amit, you talked a little bit about how that's a very unique challenge in the case of India, where you have battery swapping, which is, it's pretty unique to the context of our country. How do you tackle some of these problems? And it's not just the emerging markets. I think when it comes to EV charging, I think the whole world is an emerging market. Charging operators in Europe, for example, have grappled with the issues of how do you set up roaming between networks? How do you share infrastructure? How do you share information in real time so that users have a seamless experience, for example, driving from one part of the country to another part of the country, or indeed another country altogether. So charging operators will need to develop business models, but then also technology solutions that reflect those business models in response to the transition. The second one I want to talk about is energy managers. And let's not forget that, again, according to McKinsey, just the electrification alone will result in about 30 to 40% increase in the energy demand from electricity over the next 10 years. Now, that creates a huge challenge, but also a huge opportunity for asset owners, maybe renewable energy companies, conventional power generation companies, distribution companies, on how are they going to integrate this massive demand and also new generation, and then be able to balance it with more renewables in the grid, more storage coming online, and also additional avenues such as vehicle to grid integration or demand response based on energy distributors, particular situation at a given point of time. So as eDrive, we're working on some of these projects. As fleet operators, I think we already heard from Yulu. That's pretty much how we see these challenges evolve. So I think for four-wheelers, a lot of the plugs and the hardware part of the standardization has been addressed largely. But I think on the software side, more work remains. So as fleet operators, I think you'll continue to see issues around balancing logistics challenges, but then the technical standards that enable that kind of a unique offering for customers, and passing on the benefits in terms of the lower costs that EVs afford. And finally, I think EV drivers, let's not forget that at the end of the day, we'll not see a shift if the end users reject the transition because it's too clunky, it's inconvenient, it is not, it's not something that, they can do quite easily or seamlessly in a way that they want to go about living their lives. And so EV drivers will want to see more and more ease of access, ease of discovery, and ease of payment, and just simplicity of the charging experience. That will then kind of determine how interested they are in sort of taking on to the shift. And I think there's a lot of examples of there being friction in the EV charging shift, which I think needs to be taken away. I was inspired by Yuru's presentation on sort of the architecture, so don't want to scare people away, but I think this is how we see our role on the EV charging side. So this is kind of more, what does this mobility shift mean for digitization of the energy sector itself? So on the far right, you'll see sort of the electric vehicles coming in, but really the active role of electric e-mobility service providers would play. So this is, mobility as a service sits here in my view, user access, apps, mapping applications, routing applications, they all kind of sit here. And then in every country, you're going to end up with a situation where there are multiple networks of EV charging, and they need to balance the renewable energy, the energy supply, and manage, of course, the network of IoT devices, which are these connected chargers all across cities and states and even countries. So from the point of view of eDrive, we definitely see a huge amount of opportunity resulting from this disruption, this change of electric mobility. And so from our point of view, we see very much the solution for network operators as a big part of how we're going to achieve that, and how the energy distribution, the energy management is going to happen. And then, of course, the consumer side of it has to always be taken into account and sort of kept in mind. So with that, I'm going to stop here and happy to take more questions and jump into a little bit more of the details of some of the things that I've touched upon. But with that, I'll pass it back to you, Joachim.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Yeah, I understand it's you do the authorization via Slack. Is that correct?
Yeah, by Slack or by other means. So Slack is just one application that we have for EV charging, but we're constantly adding more. So
yeah, really, really cool. All right, thank you very much for your time and for your presentation. And
Thank you.
up next is Alex Nailov. Alex, are you ready?
Always ready.
Didn't expect anything else from you. Thank you very much. All right, Alex, when you're ready, please take it away.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction again. I'm very happy to be today here with all these panelists by the side and all the attendees listening. So I think what we're talking today is actually all of us will be talking about mostly the same things. We have a lot of things in common. And what um, I want to talk about today, basically the transit protocol, actually will also have a lot of in line with the previous speakers and probably with the rest. So let me just share my screen real quick. Yeah, so I'm from Transit Protocol, and when we looked at the whole idea of a transportation industry, there were definitely a few things that were obvious and that actually were so visible to anyone out there. Is urban transportation is out there, it's everywhere, and everybody is taking public transport. So even for the countries that have a high population of private vehicles, we should always think about that public transportation is a strategic component of any country, of any infrastructure. And billions and billions of people are taking public transport on a daily basis. But this has been happening for many, many decades, and people have been using it on a daily basis. But still, there are quite significant challenges commuting to work or school or for leisure on a daily basis. Of course, living in cities where the infrastructure is smoother, we don't see some of those negative sides. But really, for the majority of the countries, we can say that the little real-time information on the availability, on the estimated time of arrival, on how crowded the bus or the train is. This information is just not available. The options to do any planning in terms of journey, doing the pre-journey training, how to get from point A to point B, are also available, but they are quite limited and they are not global. So, of course, they're part of this multi-leg journeys when the commuter needs to jump from, let's say, a bus on a train, or maybe also use some shared vehicle or a taxi. This means that payment for all those means, all those legs, all those parts of the journey happen separately. Or expensive than uh, so every transport operator, the data it's not protected. It's just isolated. There is no synchronization. There is almost no sharing of this data. Very low insights on the traffic conditions, on connecting information, on the fleet availability, and all those things. So this is what we saw at Transit Protocol when we started looking at this industry. And the problem is on the surface. So the commuter, just like Amit said, the paradigm is not about moving vehicles, it's about moving people. So what is the mobility app? Is a mobility app is the application built for the commuter, for the person, for the people. And this application, this tool needs to be seamless. It needs to just work. It needs to be smooth. But it's not so easy, and this is why this is a big problem. So the data is the key, and the crucial component. By the sourcing for this data is at least we can say it's difficult, but it's even worse. It's very, very difficult. So of course, if we are talking about those really few cities in the world that transport authorities are taking care of this public transportation day-to-day. They structure the data, they provide the public APIs to access this data. Then those cities are in luck. But in the rest of the world, these data is very difficult to acquire. No one is doing the analysis for the data, and no one is structuring this data. Of course, if the significant component for any transportation method and for the industry is the payment and ticketing. So the payment infrastructures, the ticketing infrastructures for transport operators, as I mentioned previously, as well as the data, are totally siloed. They are living in their own small world, and even worse, their infrastructures are quite outdated. So the majority of the market, the payment and the ticketing infrastructure is a 10-plus-year-old at least. Most of the transport operators are counting that their infrastructure is 20 and more years old. There is no common platform. The interoperability is very low. And this is a very heavy task to bring those systems together. And of course, the human factor. And in this case, we are talking about those valuable resources that a company don't have at hand, and that not even getting those data scientists, data analysts to improve their systems, to run algorithms, to build their own tools to better perform the route planning, the journey planning, and the other services actually to improve and provide and to improve the experience and provide the better service for the commuters. Oops. Yeah. So this is where we came with the concept of the transit protocol as a platform, as a multimodal industry-wide platform, and empowering the transportation technology companies to build actually mobility apps faster, easy, and bringing the common ground, bringing the standard they can use, that you can utilize to overcome the problems that I mentioned previously, the problems of the data, the standards, and the system being siloed and separated. I will not go deep into details for how these can connect different players, different actors in the mobility industry. But of course, there is an organic synergy between those players, between the traditional public transportation, between the shared vehicles, between the new modes of transportation like the bicycles, the e-scooters. Of course, we are talking about all those services that surround this industry. And we are talking about the parking, we are talking about the toll, we are talking about the emergency services. So here, what we are trying to bring on is to bring the common platform, the universal standard for mobility startups, mobility companies, to utilize the knowledge of the market, utilize the knowledge of the industry, and overcome the difficulties that they need to face, that they face every day. So just not going too deep into details, not to keep it too long. So bringing the information and sourcing for the information from the transport operators, we are able to create the platform that will share the data both with the commuters on one side and the government bodies on the other side, because we have to admit public transportation is a strategic infrastructure for any government and for any country. And this is why it's very important also to take government into consideration and help them actually improve the industry with this knowledge and this data. The data that can be only processed and only analyzed if you bring enough players on the same field and utilize the same approach, the same model. Coming back to who is the king here, or why we're doing all this. So bringing the experience to the end consumer, improving the experience of the commuter taking the ride on a daily basis, needs also to make a sense for mobility operators, for mass companies, for developers that are developing the solutions, developing the applications for the commuters. So of course, there will be benefits like cost reduction, time to market, the network effect of bringing these players together and providing the access to the global network with already existing modules, existing systems, existing rules, and the knowledge and the data on how the system can improve. And of course, the compliance, which is also very important. It's staying compliant is one of the most important challenges and tasks, and compliance is something that we also keep in mind. Okay, just some numbers. I'm sure everybody among the panelists knows these numbers. Just for the attendees, why tackling this market is a very important and a very challenging and very exciting opportunity now. Just by the size of this market, we can see that almost $250 billion public transportation journeys were made in 2015. This is the latest the information that was possible to find. So $250 billion public transportation journeys. And these numbers, again, all the panelists will agree, these numbers will only go up because the trend on utilizing the public transport infrastructure is growing. The China alone, why are we talking about China? To take a side note here, Transit Protocol is based in Singapore, but our journey and our big challenge started in China. So through our Chinese partners and with the support of the Chinese Ministry of Transportation, our Chinese partners already have presence in 300 cities in China. So the China public transportation, just because of the numbers, the population size is huge. And the overall, we can say that by 2022, this is the number. So by 2022, 40 billion transport tickets will be bought via mobile or online means. And now, with the COVID, people have had time or to rethink about their ways of living. People had to cut their costs, and always cutting the cost comes maybe at the lack of some would say luxury items like personal transportation. So we will see the surge in the usage of public transportation and shared transportation. So I think we can say that now, even this factor, even the difficult year of 2020 with the virus, it will also help to reevaluate the approach to this industry. So for Transit Protocol, when I may ask how you can, in a short, represent what is your goal, what are you trying to achieve? So we are trying to back up and help to drive the innovation, just like AWS is helping the developers for the internet startups, or Plate did for financial sector, or Shopify for online stores, empowering the building of new solutions, better solutions to improve the experience of end consumers. I just touched a little bit on this before, but this could not be done 5 years ago. Now is the perfect storm. Now is the time to improve in the mobility industry. A very traditional, stagnating, outdated, the industry that had not seen too much of innovation for many decades. Now is the time. Now is the time when we need to push this industry into its new digital future, into its new, and bring the innovation to the sector. The users are ready. The technology is ready, and governments also have realized the challenge and the need for the change, and the concept of smart cities, the concept of mobility as a service is already widely accepted by the governments. This is what I also already touched upon. Our rollout with our Chinese partner is already going, and we are moving into different verticals as well. So we started from China, but we are already, we are already expanding into the Southeast Asia. So currently we are doing also Singapore, and the rest of Southeast Asia before actually moving to any other regions like Europe or Americas. And of course, as I mentioned, when I showed the big diagram, we see like that we need to expand across verticals. So we need to bring on the operators. As we started from the buses and MRT, buses and trains, but of course we see the need to bring on board more operators, the bike sharing, e-scooters, ride-hailing, taxi services, all those transport mobility operators. They need to join us, and we see how this could benefit. Just to give you a summary, will not be going over that, so please attendees, if you're interested, go through this. I would just also suggest that you can go on Medium and search for transit protocol, and you can read a few articles that we share with our community on what technologies we use, what we see as a key component for the disruption in the mobility and how to change the experience of the daily commuter. Thank you very much. I think I will be done with the short presentation. Again, not to keep everybody bored and not going too deep into details. Just want to say thank you for your time, thank you for your attention, and Joachim, up to you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Alex. In the Q&A, we already saw one question coming by, and that was, what are the challenges that you have in implementing blockchain technology in your tech stack?
Oh, that was a question to me. Okay, so of course, for the blockchain, for us, it's a very important component in a few areas. But as I mentioned before, as we are approaching the transportation industry as the unifying platform for mobility actors, for the operators, for different players in this industry, for all the way from the regular commuter to the government. And the blockchain, where the data is shared by protected, is a crucial component for us.
All right, thank you very much for your time. We have more questions coming in, so I'm looking forward to ask them and to hear your answer.
If you don't mind, I see the question. If we have any plans with Australia or New Zealand, so I can answer that really quickly.
All right.
As I mentioned, currently our big market is China. We are doing business development and starting partnerships in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia. Australia and New Zealand is definitely the market that we'll be looking at, maybe in the next phase. So not immediately, but if you are in this market and you see the opportunity and basis for us to have a talk, for sure, we're open.
All right, thanks so much, Alex. Yeah, for all the participants, I know that Alex is really close with pushing his first release to the market. So it's good to stay in touch with him. Keep on following him. All right. Then I would like to ask Raj to take the stage. Looking forward to your vision on the next forms of how vehicles will look like in the future. Take it away, Raj.
Sorry, guys, I was on mute. You guys see my screen, right?
Yes.
All right. Yeah. So I'm Rajarshi Sahai. I work for Adaptive City Mobility. We are an electric vehicle-based mass mobility company. We are trying to solve that big challenge that we all have on account of the Paris climate goals, that a mass electrification of mobility has to happen, and rather quickly. And we are trying to solve for that. I think what we'll try and do is to sort of take you through this logic, which has given us our product, but also how this is the direction that many more companies like us have to take to make that mass electrification goal possible in the first place. So let's start with the first and the most sort of obvious challenge of electric mobility, the chicken and egg problem, especially when it comes to four-wheelers. So if you remember the four quadrant of Amit Gupta, the problem with four-wheelers was that they were on the lower two quadrants and therefore harder to implement. Now, very simply put, there are not enough fast chargers. They are expensive to install, even impractical in many grid environments. And at the same time, we don't have enough electric cars, not even 1% of all global fleet. And they're expensive. They're still sort of a long way from becoming the most common form factor around us. And one way to look at this also is that the whole sort of grid situation, the ability of grids to support fast chargers worldwide, even if you have the money, it's not going to improve rather quickly, especially in the medium to low resource countries of the world. We are not going to see abundance of fast chargers. Even in the sort of blue dots here, the so-called resource rich countries, there's simply not enough density of fast chargers for you to be able to have even 50% of your fleet as electric. So we've been talking to various operators in the B2B space, or for us, the B2B space rather, the B2C players who we want to sell the cars to and the technology to. And there is a wide diversity of people we've been talking to, both in emerging and developed markets. One thing is very, very clear. So there is an update on these discussions, and let me give you a quick gist of that. One thing is that ride hailing, which until 2019 December was my biggest potential segment to sort of collaborate and sort of enthuse this conversion to electric, they simply have had massive reductions in terms of top line, in terms of rides in general, which is obvious because of Corona times. What is also interesting is there is a recursivity between ride hailing and last mile delivery. Last mile delivery for companies that span the use cases like Uber, they have really gone up at the same time as passenger mobility going down. Another interesting thing from last December, where I met most CEOs of large taxi companies in the world, also Alex, some of your massive ones in China. They are way ahead of everybody else in terms of electrification. One major problem that all of them have had is that the cars they currently have on their fleets, they simply do not support the duality of logistics and passenger mobility use case. And they've all hit that plateau where they have to improve their asset turnover, ATR, asset turnover ratio, or simply asset utilization. That is the key for mobility, four-wheeler based mobility industry, or in general any sort of vehicle based format, to be able to be profitable. And there lies the sort of crux. So one thing, that we cannot work with fast chargers, and two, that the current form factors, they're simply not good enough. That led us to completely rethink what is the conventional OEM approach to making cars. Conventional OEMs, given their legacy, have been producing cars of a certain size, of a certain kind, essentially large SUVs. If you were to look at the last decade, they are the predominant form factor. We really cannot support the electrification of those, because then it has to require a lot of energy, a lot of power to move that big chunk of metal around. Therefore, we developed our own pure play electric vehicle and vehicles that can leverage existing energy infrastructure. Let me explain you how. So our solution basically is a combination of two major pillars. One, the revolutionary energy solution, which is you can charge the car with an electric plug, which goes into your oven plug at home. So basically, essentially your domestic electricity standard, You can charge the car in 4 hours for 240 kilometers of range without hassle. What's also possible is that if that is not enough, especially if you want to do 3 shifts, you also can resort to range extenders in form of swappable batteries. This was not possible in case of large vehicles because they use high voltage architecture, which means it is not safe for you to manually swap the battery. You need robots to especially do that. NIO, for example, in China does that, but it's expensive, it's cumbersome. The other part of it, as I told you, is the innovative design that we have a lightweight vehicle, which gives you this tremendous conversion between battery capacity and range. And what it does is it allows for this vehicle to have enough space inside to give 1400 liters of storage or seating capacity for up to 5 people. And that, to me, is what is a logical sort of culmination to these 2 challenges that we have been seeing.
It's 11 hours.
That on one hand, we are stuck with the energy conundrum, and on the other hand, we are simply not improving fast enough in terms of efficiency, in terms of cost of the vehicles, in terms of a very sort of tangible, very obvious push for electrification in the mobility industry. But I think one thing that we do on top, which is also important, is that a lot of fleet owners, they still have apprehensions around how to convert to electric, how to sort of manage connected cars and energy infrastructure at the same time, like how Bhaskar mentioned, how difficult it is without technology for you to be able to utilize the plethora of options for charging, for example, or in our case, charging and swappable batteries that are available. Without that technology, it's not possible. So we created an algorithm that combines fleet management with energy management. So it's a multivariate, multilinear problems squared that solves for this for the fleet manager. So yeah, that is really the sort of form factor innovation I wanted to talk about. I can't tell you more. I can show you more because this November we do a formal launch of our series prototype. You can of course visit our website to see the German government funded research project that led to this amazing product. That's all.
All right, thank you very much, Raj. There's already one question in the Q&A, which I found rather interesting. Why don't you deal with making less cars on the road instead of having a different form of car?
Sure. So I think one thing on that is, let's start with the most important. Okay, let's look at it in terms of how the fleets are worldwide. Yeah, I mean, 4-wheelers or cars, let's call them that. They are part and participle of our rolling fleets or rolling assets across the world. Yeah. Now, what you can do is, obviously, you're right that one can produce lesser cars, definitely, but no projection in the world, including what Bhaskar mentioned, they don't talk about any less than 2 billion cars as a total global fleet in 10 years from now. So it is going to be like that. What you can have is cars which are multi-purpose, which are fundamentally more efficient. So just for example, our car is 650 kilograms, including batteries, which basically means the vehicle is 1/3 the material of a typical electric car, which means it's fundamentally more efficient. So fundamentally more efficient, fundamentally more utility driven, and less sort of driven by, showcasing the car. I think that is a good start. Yes, public transport is the ultimate sort of driver of mass and rapid mobility, but you still need vehicles to contribute to that at a neighborhood level, and that's where these cars come in.
All right. Thanks for your answer. Then I would like to proceed to Alex Puig from KLM Labs. Alex, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
All right, great. Please take the
So,
stage.
Sure, share screen. What I'm gonna talk about it's probably a little bit different from what you heard so far, because one of the things that we're focusing on it's on interoperability. A little bit on myself. Like I started with blockchain around I would say 9 years ago. So I was a really early adopter of Bitcoin at the time. Nobody talks about blockchain. It was just Bitcoin, and it was really amazing to see how all of this technology evolved. But from the beginning, one of the things I was amazed was on decentralization. So not gonna talk about blockchain, because for me, like, blockchain is a community. There's a lot of people building amazing stuff that's open source. So I'm not gonna talk about like blockchain as an ideology, because like for many people, I would say like blockchain is a religion. For me, just a technology. I'm gonna talk a little bit about decentralization on what it means for the mobility, because we've been doing a lot of pilots there, and a lot of the things that the previous speakers have been talking about, like what some of the problems they've been mentioning. I do believe that decentralization and self-sovereign identity is something I will speak about. Probably would be a really good solution for them, because basically what we are doing, what we are working on, it's in standards for communication and standards for identity. And we've been working with the IoT community also. And some of the problems they have, they are always related to security and of course to interoperability, to this kind of connection between any kind of devices. If you think of devices, of course, for me, like a car is a device, nothing more, nothing less. So decentralization, like most of the people, they don't get decentralization and what does it mean. But then we are just here right now. We have two different worlds. On one side we have the blockchain community building a lot of things. They are startups, they have developers, software foundations, that like a lot of stuff is it's being done there. But then digital society, the other side, like people working on mobility, people working on banking, on many other different sectors. Basically they're really not connected. So this innovation happening on the blockchain system, on the blockchain ecosystem, it's not really going to the real life. So if you think about something in the blockchain that is scaling, that everybody's using, so most of the things, they are really separated. So even the things that they're scaling or they are really working right now on the blockchain ecosystem, it's among the blockchain community, and it's not moving to the real world, to the people. So self-sovereign identity basically would be the glue. So far, we have an internet system that basically was not thanked to scale the way it is right now. So at the beginning, internet was a way of sharing pictures, of sharing documents. So it was quite simple. They never thought of internet as in need of having a digital identity for everyone. And when I speak about a digital identity from now on, forget about people, because yes, people, they have an identity, but we are doing identity of things, of process, of companies, of organizations, of departments. So everything for me, it has its own identity. So basically self-sovereign identity, which I will explain a little bit right now, and W3C standards that self-sovereign identity is based on, could be the glue to make the blockchain community and the digital society to work along at its finest, finally. Okay, so the idea behind self-sovereign identity, it's quite simple and quite powerful. So it's basically, I can give you a lot of examples of self-sovereign identity, but I would say like, let's give like one identity system in internet. This identity system, it's controlled by the end user. So instead of having thousands of identities, we'll have just one, and we have full control on that. Right now, the digital identity industry is quite fragmented. But one of the things, like even as a citizen, I have, I think usually it's around 80 identities each person. That's the average. So each one of you should have around 80 different identities, but you control none of them. So you have a lot of information with Google, with Facebook, with even Twitter, with your current government, by the way, with the tax agency. So all of those are identities that somebody else is giving to us. So we have no control over that. Imagine a world where instead of like, okay, the plural model of identity, where there's a lot of people controlling identity and it's fragmented, and it's not secure, so our data is spread across the internet. We move to a system where I have just one identity. Okay, and this one identity is controlled by us. Just to simplify things, because it's not that simple, imagine that you have a box at your home, maybe a Raspberry Pi, but you have a box at your home dealing with your identity. And it's the same like in the physical world. Right now, if you want anybody to send you a letter, you have home, you have a digital PO box, you have a PO box, so people send things there. And when you get home, you will receive them. In the digital world, it does not work like that, because you have email, you have WhatsApp, you have Telegram, it's completely fragmented. And once again, we have no control over all of these documents being sent to all of these places. So like the idea with a subsidiary identity, it's like, okay, why don't we can prove existence, but at the same time have full control over our identity, control the access on our identity, so even we can delegate the identity if we want to, because we are in control, it's ours. And then should have transparency, persistence, like no matter where do I go, what do, I still have the same identity. Probably the two more important for me is portability and interoperability. And once again, if you think about like the identity of a card, that's quite important. Then yes, content minimization and protection, okay? So basically, if you have blockchain plus subsidiary identity, everything glued together. And by the way, the European Commission, like I'm part of, I'm the co-chair of the Digital Identity Working Group at INADBA. So basically, we're working for a standard for digital identity with the European Commission and even for a sandbox. So the European Commission, it's pushing its agenda towards this technology, okay? So in a world where we have a decentralized identity, where we have this box, there's no such a thing as a number identifying us. So we don't have a number like a national identity card, or maybe the number of the card. Instead of that, we have like a wallet of credentials. And what's a credential? It's a proof that somebody else gave to me about something real. I'm gonna think about vehicles, because we already did that. We already did that. We did a wallet for a car, and the car could prove that it was an electric vehicle. It could prove how many people was on the car. It could prove how new the car was, or if the people in the car, they were living in the same city as the car was driving through. So we started working on different kind of solutions based on this decentralized identity, where the car could control its own identity and interact with everything around it, to create this real interoperability. And in the systems that we're working on, if you think about interoperability, I think a lot of people is talking about that, but if you think few people understand what it really means. I'm gonna try to, if you like, I know Joachim and I have WhatsApp, and Joachim, maybe he has Telegram. So if I want to speak to Joachim and he has Telegram, probably I will need to install Telegram. That's not interoperability, because then complexity, it keeps adding up. Like I need to install two programs in my mobile phone to being able to talk to him. So when it comes to companies or maybe mobility solutions, that means that every time that I want my company or my system or even my car to interact with a different third party, or a different, even the regulator or the parking, whoever I want to talk to, I need to create a new interoperability point, a new API integration, and that keeps adding like complexity. Of course, that brings a lot of errors, and also keeps adding like price. It's really expensive to do that. So imagine that instead of that, by using this kind of system with a centralized identity, we can use like the car in the middle. And instead of, I can use my WhatsApp to speak to a Telegram, because I don't care. And then from the backend side, I just need to have one integration into this system, into the self-sovereign identity system, to being able to interoperate with any company. Why? Because I go through the car. So there's like a parking, and there's like any kind of company owning the car, they can talk through a car, because they just need to give service to the car. So imagine like I have a fine, and the city council, the city sends a fine to the car gets the fine to me, so I tell the bank to pay the fine, and then finally the city gets notified that the fine was paid. But in this system, decentralized, I have full control, I have full consent, but then one of the funny things is like the bank and the city, they don't need to be connected. And even like if there's an insurance, it doesn't have to be connected to the different rental car companies or whatever mobility companies they have to be there. They just can go through the car seamlessly with all of these third parties that they want to be part of this workflow, they just need to do one integration with the car, not like really. I did the calculations. It's n squared less n divided by 2. So that's the level of complexity that you need when a lot of different companies, they have to interoperate. And of course, that's not sustainable at all, and that's expensive. And from the cybersecurity perspective, that could be really dangerous. So that was it. Like I just tried to tell you in just a minute's words how sovereign identity is and the implications it has for mobility. Happy to talk to you guys later, or maybe if you want to have a hangout with me later, happy to talk about it. Thank you.
All right, great. Alex, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this great presentation and for your time. I would like to ask you a question on how would you see an implementation of self-sovereign identities in the case of COVID and public transport?
Sorry, can
Yeah, so the implementation of self-sovereign identities in public transport, would it help to battle the COVID situation?
It does, because basically you don't need any kind of human interaction. Like I can prove a lot of things. Like one of the things that we've been working on with the local government of Catalonia was on we call it zero knowledge proof. Zero knowledge proof is just like one certificate, so I can prove to you that I'm COVID free or I just did my test. Or maybe it's things like that I had my temperature tested this morning and I was fine. So you can create this. It's not really a passport, because a lot of people, they've been talking about like the passport for mobility, so you can move. It's just like a daily challenge that I can prove like the level of danger that I'm up to. So if I do my test, if I work for a city for the city hospital, all these kind of things generate a set of proofs that I can show, so I can move without. You're mute.
Oh, sorry. No, I was not asking a question. No problem, Alex.
Okay, so that's a little. Imagine that I just can move through the city, like opening barriers or getting to places where I can prove like that I can move. The same with the car, the same with everything. But I can prove that I can move without even sharing my name. I could be like I could be working for the government, so I have the right to move, and or maybe I just did a PCR that morning, so I'm free of COVID. And that makes a really seamless and easy to do mobility. Once again, because it's completely decentralized, I can integrate with any system and everybody can check that what I'm saying is true. But at the same time, by using zero knowledge proof, even if I prove to you that I'm COVID free and then I prove someone else, they cannot connect to each other and see that it's me, it's the same person. So we are protecting the privacy of the people at the same time.
Okay, great, thank you very much. So let's get started with the Q&A session. So I see one typical question popping up, and it's about the fact that our industry is a bit male-dominated. So it's a good question, which I think we definitely should touch. So I can answer it from our perspective. So obviously we have a software company, we have 30 people working here, and what we try to do is just hire the best people, and a lot of them are females. So I think for us, it's we don't do it on purpose, but I think there is definitely a change going on at this moment with an entire new generation of women who are beating men in many different perspectives. So if you see the average of men versus female, with the grades that they leave high school or university, women beat men. So I think it will change to a more diverse future. And all we can do is, of course, just give the right example on that. And of course, I would like to ask you, Alex, to take your perspective on this, because I know you're Yeah, I know the situation you're working in.
So I fully agree. Like in my company, I'm the CTO, I do the technology, but then my wife, she's the CEO, and basically she takes all of the decisions. And we see a problem there. Usually our perspectives are quite different. And one of the things that we found out is that we need a lot of people thinking on this, and just technology is just something you use. It's a tool, but you need to think about the consequences of the technology you're using at all. So you need probably philosophers, I would say, or any kind of people with a different perspective of technology. Most of the technology guys, yeah, we are male and we do it because we can. So we need to stop a little bit and think about the models that we are working on. And completely yes, but the truth is that my wife, she should be speaking here, but she does not like speaking in public because she's in the back like doing all of the stuff. So don't worry if we are male here, because like we have a woman in the back like leading us and telling us what to do. So that's fine.
Yeah, so that thank you for your answer, Alex. All right, I would like to ask the next question to Raj. The next question is: to what extent does the smart mobility industry help countries to recover, or maybe also just to help to battle the coronavirus effects?
Sure. I mean, I try and answer that at a very sort of fundamental level. So one thing is that mobility is, if you think of a city as a production hub, then mobility is a very important factor of production there. So a city economy cannot really function well without mobility, both of the social and economic kinds. And I think what we are seeing, so I gave you our own example of how the technology and the vehicle component, we are trying and sort of use it to optimally distribute resources between passenger mobility and logistics. I think that's where the smart part of smart mobility really comes through, that we have to be judicious with whatever resources we have. Corona has made a lot of disruption and also refocus of resources when it comes to next 5 years, and therefore resource utilization at an optimum level, the ability of digital platforms to redistribute capacity to where it is needed the most. For example, if you want all your buses to go and help your medics, please let's try and have systems to do that. I think that is the core of what smart mobility can do in terms of not just the disaster response part of COVID, but also the recovery part following COVID.
All right, great. Thank you very much. There is another question popping up, and it's about the downsides of having electrical vehicles. I would like to shine my perspective on that. So one big downside, I think, of having electric vehicles on the road in this stage is that it supports a society which is unequal in many perspectives. So what you see in very developed countries is that there are a lot of electrical vehicles popping up, but this electricity needs to be produced somewhere. So although, for example, China is leading the way in electric vehicles, they are also building new coal plants in Myanmar. So to support for these, to provide for the electricity all these cars need. So I think it's a good development, but definitely we are in a very early stage at the moment. So that's why I also think it's very interesting to see that many of the panelists are not talking about mobility, but talking about batteries. So that was quite surprising for me. Oscar, do you have what is your perspective on this?
So on the EVs, I think Joachim, I'd definitely echo the point that, well, first of all, EVs are good only if it's your third car that only runs 5,000 kilometers in a year, then it's definitely not. It's an evil EV, right? It's not serving the purpose. I think wherever you have very high utilization in shared situation where, or you may have, particular use case where you just run a vehicle excessively, I think the more you run it, the better it is essentially the rule of thumb, whether by application or just by usage. And that's why we're already seeing that the first sectors to switch are, in shared, in fleets, in delivery, where vehicles are running a lot. So I think that's the rule of thumb that I would kind of keep in mind. And of course, it's not to say that, individual car ownership is a problem. I think traffic is a problem, and I think EV doesn't solve that problem. So, it's a part of the solution. It's not the solution. And I think that's why, a higher level mobility focus at the urban level, how transit happens, how last mile, first mile connectivity happens, how public transport is enabled and prioritized. I think that's what is going to get us to the, ultimate objectives, like in spirit, what we're trying to do with decarbonization, and not just switching to EVs.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, and being from the Netherlands originally, I also think that the role of human-powered bicycles is also underappreciated at the moment, because in that perspective, the Netherlands is really a unique country where many of our journeys take place via a bicycle. So that cliche is very, very much true. And each time I come back to the Netherlands, I see that difference, of course, which is very, very beneficial for cities, but also for humans to just keep us very healthy. And,
well, with a pinch of salt.
Sorry, I was going to say, the cleanest car is the car you don't buy. Sorry.
And Netherlands is as bad as West Europe when it comes to corporate fleet. So don't try and sort of evangelize it beyond a point, Joachim. I think no, it's an interesting point that as Bhaskar said, just the fact that we have to have so many cars. There is EU data which says 90% trips do happen on cars. So that sort of normal has to be also broken. I think one factor that is also to be covered in this discussion is the matter of embedded energy in an electric car. I think Bhaskar briefly sort of touched on it when he said that a car that is being used as a third car, that's a big sin, purely because electric cars currently use more materials, more energy to produce such car, and therefore that energy is to be expensed over a lot many more kilometers. I think what I sort of took the panel through is that we are trying to reduce the kind of number of components, amount of material, amount of battery capacity in the car. So that's one way. There's also now there are also now initiatives in the industry where each and every component is to be traced. So like Alex, there is going to be an identity for every vehicle, but then there is also going to be an identity for every part or component, and how that is then recycled, it is to be traced. So I think this is also an important part, that electric cars are also ahead in time and with lesser components. This is our opportunity to also make sure each and every component is accounted for in terms of how that energy is embedded and then expensed and then eventually recovered in this process. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for your answer, Raj. Okay, so we have, if there are no questions coming up, let me check. Yeah, then we had already an hour and a half in this webinar, which is great. And I really would like all the panelists, all speakers, thank you very much for your presentations, for your insights, for sharing your experience. Thank you very much for attending our webinar. we have recorded this webinar, and we will share the webinar in the next days via email as well. So maybe if you want to listen to it again or share it with friends, feel free to do so. One more thing I would like to add is that we have another webinar coming up in December. It will be all about logistics, so we will also keep you up to date on that. And for now, I would like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you for attending, and I would like to see you in December again. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.